Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is easily one of the most highly anticipated and, honestly, heavily scrutinized geopolitical events of the entire decade. We're talking about the May 2026 meeting between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. We're going to look closely at the underlying motivations, the stark warnings, and the incredibly high-stakes diplomatic maneuvering happening right now in Beijing. To really grasp the sheer gravity of this meeting, we just have to look at how the leaders themselves are framing it. Right out of the gate, President Trump threw massive weight behind this event. You can see it right here. He suggested it may be the biggest summit ever, and he arrived in China just showering his host with accolades. He publicly called President Xi a great leader, a friend, and even extended an early invitation for Xi to visit the White House later in September.
But look, this isn't just about friendly optics. The main takeaway here is the profound, historic significance of this moment. This trip breaks a nearly decade-long drought of U.S. presidential visits to China. 10 years! When you consider the extreme global tension we're seeing right now, a drought of that length between the world's two largest superpowers, it's just staggering. This visit is literally an attempt to bridge an immense divide.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The high stakes in Beijing. 2. China's red line on Taiwan. 3. America's priority with the Iran war. 4. Seeking economic wins. And 5. The geopolitical leverage game.
Starting off with Section 1, high stakes in Beijing, pomp, circumstance, and peril.
When you look at the footage from the summit, the first thing that hits you is the grand spectacle, right? The honor guard, the state banquets, throngs of kids waving flowers at the Great Hall of the People. But beneath all that heavily choreographed pomp and circumstance, we saw immense bluntness from President Xi. During a state banquet toast, which, is a setting usually reserved for light diplomatic pleasantries, Xi delivered a totally unvarnished assessment. He acknowledged that citizens of both countries share a deep mutual respect, but he firmly stated that this is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. He flat out said, "We must make it work and never mess it up." It's a crystal clear signal that the margin for error here is essentially zero. Moving on to Section 2, China's red line, Taiwan, the non-negotiable issue. Now, while President Xi spoke in slightly less effusive tones regarding personal friendships, he didn't waste a single second bringing up Beijing's absolute #1 priority. Right off the bat, Xi explicitly called the Taiwan question the most important issue in China-US relations. And he issued this incredibly stark, uncompromising warning directly to Trump. He stated that mishandling this issue could push the two nations to collide or even come into conflict. It's a really vital reminder to all of us watching that the risk of actual physical conflict is legitimately on the table if diplomatic lines are crossed.
To put this into perspective, we can look at insights from reporters on the ground, like Al Jazeera's Katrina Yu. She points out something super interesting. Beijing is actively offering Washington a lot of flexibility. They're willing to accept disagreements on trade, on tech, even on the situation in Iran. But all of those niceties, all of that friendliness, it comes with one massive string attached. It is completely conditional on Washington accepting that there is only one China and that Beijing is utterly serious about bringing Taiwan under its control.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tightrope the U.S. is walking. Let's freeze on this definition for a second, because the key to understanding the American position is a policy called strategic ambiguity. Basically, this means the U.S. acknowledges Taiwan exists and is part of Greater China, and they don't support any Taiwanese independence movement. However, and this is a big however, they firmly oppose China taking over Taiwan by force. It's an incredibly delicate balancing act. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent even noted in an interview that Trump understands these sensitivities and will actually be speaking more on this matter in the coming days.
Which brings us to Section 3, America's priority Iran war, a need for stability.
So, shifting to the other side of the table for a minute, what's driving the American delegation? Well, if China's priority is Taiwan, America's immediate crisis and their overarching priority at this summit is the desperate need for stability surrounding the war with Iran. It really comes down to the political reality back home. The source material highlights that President Trump's domestic approval ratings have been distinctly dented by this ongoing war with Iran, a conflict that, frankly, currently shows no signs of abating. Because of this, the U.S. administration desperately needs to find crucial, tangible wins abroad to counter the domestic political drag caused by this prolonged conflict in the Middle East. Next up, Section 4, Seeking Economic Wins, Finding the Common Ground.
Now, despite their massive differences over territorial claims and global dominance, both of these nations desperately need a win right now.
The White House actually formally concluded that Trump had a good meeting with Xi, noting that preparatory negotiations had already reached some pretty balanced and positive outcomes. So let's fire off the concrete consensus points they actually agreed upon during their 2 hours and 15 minutes of talks. First, both leaders agree that the Strait of Hormuz absolutely must remain open for the free flow of global energy. Second, they agree Iran should not possess a nuclear weapon. And on the business front, they discussed expanding market access for American businesses entering China while simultaneously increasing Chinese investment into U.S. industries. Finding this kind of common ground, that is exactly the economic win the U.S. delegation was searching for.
Finally, Section 5, the geopolitical leverage game, differing priorities.
When we strip away the state banquets and the diplomatic pleasantries, let's be real. We are left with two global superpowers sitting across from one another, each driven by entirely different, yet equally urgent, underlying motivations. The crucial point is right in front of us, where we can clearly contrast these desperate needs. On one side, you have the U.S. priority, containing the political and economic fallout of the Iran war by securing immediate stabilizing economic wins with Beijing. On the other side, you have China's priority, ensuring absolute control over Taiwan and enforcing their one China policy. Each side knows exactly what the other side desperately wants, and each is using their own priority as leverage against the other. It's like a giant geopolitical puzzle.
I want to share this perfect summary from Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher because it encapsulates this whole dynamic flawlessly. He reported from Beijing saying, "For the U.S., it is all about Iran. For China, it is all about Taiwan. And the two of them believe they have leverage over the other to move positions." The single quote just totally captures the entire high-stakes chess match taking place at this summit. It's not just about what they can agree on, It's about what they can extract from one another.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought-provoking question. We've seen the historic nature of this visit, the stark warnings over Taiwan, and the desperate search for economic stability amidst the Iran war. But the ultimate outcome? It remains completely uncertain. Will this delicate game of leverage, where both sides hold exactly what the other needs, actually force them into a stable working partnership? Or will a misstep in this incredibly fragile balancing act push the world's most important bilateral relationship into a truly perilous conflict? It's a question that's absolutely going to define global politics for years to come. Thanks so much for joining us to untangle all of this today, and keep learning.